It's time for another local housing market update, and I have some really interesting information that could help you take advantage of opportunity now. Let's get started. Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel. I'm Erica Monroe. I'm a realtor in the Bay Area and I specialize in Solano County. If you've been participating in our housing market over the last couple weeks, you've probably been aware that our MLS system got hacked. We have not been able to bring new listings to market. We haven't been able to do price reductions. It's been incredibly frustrating for everybody involved. But I do think that there's a silver lining that's going to bring some incredible opportunity for buyers. We have not been able to bring new listings to market for about 2 weeks now, and I think we're going to get access to the MLS as early as tomorrow, which means there's likely to be an influx of inventory. Now, it's probably not going to be a huge amount, but it'll likely be more than what we've been dealing with, and I'm sure you're tired of scrolling through the same stale listings. We're also likely to see some price reductions because there are sellers who need to sell, perhaps they're relocating, and they've lost about 2 weeks worth of time. Historically, this time of year, the buyer pool shrinks. Some folks are focused on school and work and sports schedules, and they just don't have the bandwidth to look for a house. That means less competition, a little more inventory, some price reductions. There's definitely going to be some opportunity for you in the next week or two. Now let's move on to the elephant in the room, interest rates. You may be thinking, great, there's going to be a little more inventory, there'll be less competition, but where are the rates? The rates are high right now. We are averaging about 7%. Industry experts were projecting that we would have lower interest rates by this time in the year, but it just goes to show you can never project for a perfect market. Now, this may be an unpopular opinion for those who are not involved in real estate every day, but in my opinion, buyers potentially have more leverage today than they did when rates were lower. Now, let me walk you through that because I know that sounds crazy. Remember that when rates are low, obviously it's cheaper to borrow money. Your dollar on paper stretches further. You can, for example, more comfortably afford that $750,000 house that has lots of nice upgrades. But when you see the opportunity, all other buyers also see opportunity and they jump into the ring. So you have a lot more competition. What happens when you have competition? It drives up the price point. Yes, you may have qualified for the $750,000 house, but it's not going to sell at $750,000. You likely would need to have cash reserves to throw at the house to be competitive. So on paper, that house was listed at $750,000. It's likely to sell, let's say, at $820,000. Well, who has that much cash ready to go? Keep in mind that house still has to appraise. Anytime you have financing, an appraiser goes out, and that's the amount the bank will base their loan off of. When interest rates are low, there's usually a discrepancy between market value, what a buyer's willing and able to pay, and appraisal value. And generally, in a hot market, the buyer would have to make up the difference in cash. And possibly you would be priced out of the competition because you don't have cash reserves. You also likely weren't able to investigate the property. In a hot market, it's common for sellers to provide some disclosures and you waive your contingencies, accepting the house as is despite potential large problems. Right now, you can take your time to investigate the home. You can do all the inspections to your heart's desire to make sure the house is in good condition. And if there are issues, you can go back to the seller and try to negotiate your terms. You might be able to get credit back or ask them to do some repairs. That was unheard of 2 years ago. So in that frame of mind, you may be able to get into a house at list price today, possibly a little lower, but you also may have the ability to negotiate some dollars off or credit back. Appraisal, like we mentioned, in a hot market, you often have to waive your appraisal contingency or guarantee the gap between where the house appraises on paper and where you think it's worth or what you're offering. You don't have to do that right now. You can retain your appraisal contingency. If the house doesn't appraise for what you're offering, you can potentially go back to the seller and say, hey, the value isn't there. We need to lower the price or we're walking. Right now, market value and appraisal value are pretty much in line, so you're less likely to have a large discrepancy. Pro tip that not everybody knows, but could be a game changer for you. Did you know that FHA and VA loans, so federally backed and military loans, are assumable as long as a future buyer can meet all of the qualifications for that loan type? So for example, if a seller has an FHA loan and they have a 3% interest rate, as long as you qualify, you might be able to take over their loan at 3%. Now, in this scenario, a seller's probably going to be able to command more money for their house than it's worth on paper because of the incentive of the low interest rate. So that is something to keep in mind, because you would have to make up the difference in cash. For example, let's say a house on paper is worth $500,000 and the seller still owes $480,000. That means in order for you to assume their loan, you would have to at minimum have $20,000 in cash to make up the difference. But the extra incentive of being able to get into a lower interest rate might drive up that price point. So you might be looking at a $520,000 purchase. You'd still have to make up the difference. The house likely won't appraise for that. So this is a great opportunity for folks who do have a little bit of cash ready to go. It could afford you the opportunity to get into a home at a much lower interest rate than what's available on the market today. I do want to remind you that it is technically still a seller's market, and that's due to very limited inventory, and that has helped protect home values. Now, we have seen a small reduction. You're probably seeing some price improvements. We are on average about 3 to 4% lower in home values this year than we were this time last year. Now that's real money, I understand, but in the grand scheme of things, it's by no means a crash. It's by no means a huge reduction in value. Buyers, as we've discussed over the last couple weeks, are scrutinizing properties more, and they're taking their time before they're submitting offers. So the median days in Solano County to stay on market before getting into contract is about 31. Anything past that, you may start to see some larger price reductions. Overall, we're not seeing a huge reduction in home values. So that leads me to sellers. Is now a good time to sell? Well, in my opinion, if you bought your house before the end of 2021, you're most definitely still enjoying home value appreciations that happened during and just post-pandemic. And yes, I do think you can still command a nice price point. It's going to be different than last year, but you can still command a great price point as long as you put effort into presenting your house to the best of your ability. We don't want your listing to go stale. So check out the video above to give you some great insight in how to stage your house. You're competing with model homes right now and beautiful imagery all over Instagram. So if you want your house to sell quickly and for the most amount of money, you need to do your due diligence, put in the effort to put your best foot forward. What can we expect for the rest of the year? I think it's going to be very comparable to what we're facing now. I think it's still going to be limited inventory. It's going to be a smaller buyer pool. They are going to take their time in making this decision. It's a huge decision after all. But historically in my business, the fourth quarter of the year has always been busy. And I find that it's very serious and well-qualified buyers. It's serious and reasonable sellers. It's easier to come to a meeting of the minds as far as purchase price and negotiating any sort of credits or repairs. At this point, I think a lot of buyers have just accepted that the rates are what they are, and they'll plan to hopefully refinance in the near future. But they won't have to go into a bidding war to get this house at potentially a higher price point when rates fall. There's no projection that I'm aware of that shows that interest rates are going to fall back down to the 2s or 3s. We'll definitely see some softening, maybe in the 6s or 5s, and that can change affordability for a lot of folks. But anybody who's holding out to wait for that 2 or 3%, my friends, you may be waiting too long. You might actually price yourself out of home ownership altogether. And folks who have to sell in order to buy, I think there's a lot of opportunity here, especially if you're looking in the higher price points. You are in good company. A lot of folks do have to sell their properties in order to purchase another one. That's very reasonable. But in a hot market where rates are really low, that was really unheard of over the last couple years. You still probably have to have your house on the market, ideally in contract, but at the very least on the market before a seller would consider you as a viable buyer. At the end of the day, it's a great time to buy or sell if it makes sense for you, if you can afford the higher monthly payments, if you're wanting to get out of your current house and you have your eyes set on a new one. It could be a great opportunity for you. I understand it doesn't make sense for everyone. For those who are wanting to participate and you want more in-depth information on each city, because keep in mind what happens in Vallejo is very different than what happens in Vacaville's housing market. We are hyper local here. Sassoon is different than where Fairfield, Green Valley, Cordelia is gonna fall. So if you're considering buying or selling, reach out to me. I will give you real-time information and stats that'll help you be successful in today's market.